You don't have to worry, because you still have your robes, and they'll be just as good as new. You probably kill the funeral attendant. It's like, ah! But I love those stories, and those stories, one was from the sutras, the other one was from the anecdote from here, this time, only a few years ago. There's also other anecdotes, and if you're really interested, I can tell you more about those later. But I know that many people have heard those stories before. They are true. But some people say, well, we've heard those, haven't you got any new ones? And that's what I'm depending on you for. Please get into a nice jhana, and we'll send you to the crematorium anyway, just so I can get some more material for the talks. Would you volunteer, Ananda? Okay, anyway. Dear Ajahn Brahm, great retreat, thank you. I've only just started. You ain't heard anything yet. During meditation, while staying with the breath, I sometimes notice a purple light or glow hovering over my awareness, my vision, not physical sight, but it feels very present at times when it moves across me. I stay with the breath, but it distracts me. Then thoughts arise, it stays for a while, then fades. I also sometimes gently guide myself with inner talk during meditation. I don't know how to silence my inner chatter, analyzing my breath, talking about the breath. Could you please advise how can I work with the light and inner talk skillfully? One thing about the inner talk, now you want to find out what these things are. But please know, this is something I learned as a scientist. You take down all of the readings from all those instruments during the experiment, but you're always trained. You can write down, record the readings on those instruments, but you mustn't think about it yet. Because if you start thinking about it and drawing conclusions during the experiment, you deny some of the readings, or you exaggerate some of the other readings. You'll fudge the results. So it's almost like a training, being an experimental physicist. You don't draw conclusions until you've got all the results in. But then sometimes people, they can understand that, but they say, well, I might forget some of those readings you get in deep meditation. And that's one of the things I would like to emphasize. I was going to say I like to stress, but we don't use the word stress when we're talking about letting go and relaxing. One of the amazing things you find out, that when you get into deep meditation, these 5 hindrances disappear, and one of the ones which disappears, which I think is the most interesting and fascinating of these 5 hindrances, is doubt. And I say that because for years and years and years and years, I didn't understand what doubt actually is. Because sometimes, you have memories, but was that accurate or not? But when you have an experience of a deep meditation, it's so clear. It leaves a very, very powerful imprint on your mind. You can recall it just so easily. Much more easily than ordinary memories, because the hindrance of doubt has been eradicated for many, many hours. And that was a kind of a strange part of these 5 hindrances, which took a long time for me to really get my mind around and understand it. When those hindrances are disappeared, the only word which I can use, the only English word which is remotely similar but is still not good enough, is like a trauma. If you've ever had a trauma, you've been very close to death, then sometimes you can't get it out of your mind. It's so easy to recall. Ordinary memories are not as recallable. But this is what happens also when you have not dangerous experiences, but incredibly pleasant experiences. The pleasure, the power of these deep meditations are so great that you can just turn your mind to them, and they're right there, back again. Not just being right inside them, but actually you can get all the details back so easily. And that's a wonderful thing to know, because it means you don't have to worry, I better sort of think about this and work it out now because I might forget it later on. If it really is a deep meditation, you can't forget it. You can recall it so easily. And what you recall is so accurate. Okay, I'll tell this story. That I've got to be very careful, with personal experiences. And I have to be careful because, it's against our Vinaya rules for monks and nuns as well. But I've told this little anecdote many times. So, it is just inside the rules. I know all the loopholes. That's why I studied the Vinaya. That's where I learnt my Pali. So because I know all the loopholes and how far I can go and how I can't go. So this was one of those times, early times over here in Jhana Monastery. Had a nice meditation. As you were coming out afterwards, I had this kind of insight. The insights come from nowhere. I don't know why I had this idea. Was, what is my earliest memory? That anecdote. I've said that many times. And because my mind was just so clear, when I asked myself, what is my earliest memory? Straight away, I mentioned that you can recall it so easily. You don't have to think. You just point your mind to that experience so many years ago, and it's straight back in your head. And firstly, immediately when I said that, I had this smell in my nose. Not a sight, not a physical feeling, but a smell. And the smell, the odor was of my baby's pram when I was only a few weeks old. And I hadn't studied medicine or what happens to kids as they grow up and how their brain develops. But it was a smell, immediate recognition. That's the pram in which I grew up in the first weeks of my life. It's a pretty early memory, it qualifies. And then the interesting thing was, I could explore it. It's almost like as soon as I recognized that's me, my baby's pram, it was like I was back in there again. I remember just like crawling under the covers, feeling them, seeing their colors and what else was in there. You could do that, kind of weird. But you remembered everything. My parents were poor, but it was just, a black and a few light white sheets. But the one thing which I always remember, they had my favorite toy in that pram, which was this light blue, I still don't know, porcelain or plastic, probably plastic, little pig. And I still remember the name, which my mother used to call it, Porky. The original, but no, I still remember that. And it had little beans or something inside it, and she would shake it, and which delighted me for some reason. But also, that was just sound and sight. But what really I was fascinated with, I knew my pram, and I knew my mother, not by how she looked, but how she smelt. There's no like a sort of a dog with the smell is just so prominent. As a baby, in those first weeks of life, the smell was the most prominent of the senses. And it was that particular experience which, when I told others, what had happened, they were fascinated because I never was taught that before. That smell is just how babies find their way around their sort of environment, their loved ones. But that's what I found out, and people who know more than I know about the development of a brain of a baby said that's totally correct. Early days of your life, your sense of smell is a dominant sense. So I say that to any mothers who've just got a very young kid. Please don't change your perfume. It will confuse everything about your kid's recognition of you. There's lots of other stories, but the main part of that story was, I can recall it even now. The memory of it is just so long-lasting and clear. And you know you're not imagining this. Imaginations are totally different. This is like a clear memory. And that's the same with anybody else who goes deeper and, what's your earliest memory earlier, please, and get into past life or between life memories. You're not making this up. It's hard to convince people of this who don't even believe it's possible, or don't believe in rebirth and previous lives. But if you look at that quality of that memory, even the quality of the experience, it's just without any doubt. That hindrance has been suppressed for a while. What that means, you don't have to think about what's happening. Enjoy the experience, which is fascinating. And number two, you know that what your experience is, you can recall so easily. When you come out of these meditations, then you can ask the questions. Then you can use that mind of analyzing, exploring, because you've gathered the material, now you can test it. Does that make sense to you? It's a great relief to me to know just how true that is. And so you don't have to go thinking and disturbing the meditation. Get some more details. And also, just to let you know that when I've been teaching this for so many years, that sometimes, I remember just one gentleman, he said, Ajahn Brahm, please don't teach that anymore to lay people. I said, why? And he said, because he got his early memories when he was a baby, and he said, earlier please. Then he got some very unpleasant experiences of him dying. And I apologized to him and said, I should have figured that one out. When you go earlier please, what's the most powerful experience you've had in your previous life? Usually your death moments. Or actually just before your death moments, because dying is often because of some painful sickness or because of some accident. And if you start recording the painful experiences, that's hard to bear. And it really is like you're back in there. It's happening to you, it's real. So don't be concerned. Just if that ever happens, tell yourself just earlier, please. In that state of mind, you're just out of meditation, but you still have the power of the mind, you'll be amazed at just how the mind just behaves. You just say earlier, please, it goes earlier. It doesn't you don't force it. If you have to force anything, it's not real. Just a quick suggestion, earlier, please, and you just go back earlier. So you can still have these amazing experiences. And you can prove for yourself that rebirth actually happens. You have lived before. Sometimes people say, show us the proof. This is how you see the proof. So anyway, this is how to deal with this. You don't need to actually analyze whatever's happening. And a purple light, that's very common, that purplish light, excellent, enjoy it. And don't keep with your breath. The breath has done its job. You see a beautiful light. And what you need to do now is stabilize it. Sampasadanang chitang and samadhahang chitang. Keep it still. Those two things. I'll say more about that later on, about how to deal with these nimittas so they can last and they don't move around, they don't just cross your mind, they just stay. And as they stay, they get brighter and brighter, more and more beautiful. and they take you into these jhanas. So the breath has done its job. Once the breath has done its job and a nimita is there, if you can just let it be and let it stay, allow it to happen. Don't make it happen. Don't think you've lost awareness of the breath, you must be doing something wrong. No, the awareness of the breath has done its job, now you're going to a more refined object. And that's how it happens. And you can silence the inner chatter because it's not necessary. You don't need to justify, well, if I don't sort of figure out what's going on, I'm not quite sure what will happen, and I won't get any wisdom. After it's happened, and you come out, that's when you get the great wisdom from. Does that make any sense to you? Because that's one of the reasons I teach. You get enough people experience these great things, and just more people just having understandings about previous lives, and having an understanding of what real bliss is, and actually who you are and who you're not. Okay. Please speak about the immaterial states after the fourth jhana, or maybe a morning talk on the subject. I usually don't say much about the immaterial states, what they call the arupas, and the reason I don't say much about that is just allowing you to get or encouraging to get even just a fourth jhana, a real fourth jhana. Oh, that blows your mind. Greatest bliss you've ever experienced, and that is enough, honestly, to get into these deep meditation, to get into enlightenment states. But what happens next? First of all, the immaterial states are based on the fourth jhana. You have to have that fourth jhana first. And you stay in that fourth jhana, very stable, very still. And what did I say happens when things are still? Something disappears. And that's what happens if you're in the fourth jhana long enough, some things disappear. And the immaterial attainments, or whatever you call it, and I don't like the word attainments, immaterial states, this is when something else is vanishing slowly. And what's vanishing slowly in the immaterial states is this thing you call mind. The mind is disappearing, it's fading away. And many times people say, hey, hang on, maybe I don't mind the will disappearing, but me disappearing, the mind, the knowing. It's wonderful if you can experience that, if you've got the courage to do that. It's very blissful. And that's what's actually happening. I'll give some more talks about that later on if people are interested, because it's about the greatest simile I've got to explain this really properly is the 1,000-petal lotus simile. That takes a long time. So anyway, the next question here. What is the highest stage of enlightenment a layperson may attain if they have a family, including a wife, and is engaging in sexual activity? I.e., how enlightened can a being be if they're having sex? You can't get deep meditation in the process when you're... But afterwards, yes. But afterwards, you just can't have any sexual relations anymore. It can't happen anymore. Because when you get into a deep state of meditation, and become even like a fully enlightened being, there's no way that you can get excited enough bodily. The body is just in the background, still there. You still eat, but actually you just do the minimum. So you won't be able to have. Please excuse me. I don't know why I keep. It's only once when I was in Thailand, I was just quite open and using these terms, and I got criticised for it. Said a monk shouldn't even mention the word sexual intercourse. I was a layperson for many. I wasn't born as a monk. And I did have, an active sexual life with a few girlfriends, but not at the same time. And I'm very grateful for that, in the sense that you know what you were renouncing when you were a monk. So, but once you get into some states of enlightenment, then that doesn't interest you anymore. You're out of the world. So anyway, that's if a layperson does become fully enlightened, they may be married before and have a family, then that whole part of life just are not interested anymore. It doesn't really grab them anymore. And sometimes people will think you're crazy. You're not crazy. You just see something much more deeper. And so those old stuff doesn't interest you anymore. I don't know if I answered that question good enough for you, but try to be as honest as you possibly can. Dear Ajahn, what a blessing to practice and study under your guidance. I don't know what you mean, because I'm me, so I cannot study under my guidance. Does that make sense to you? Most probably due to very, very, very good karma. The question, jhanas are meditative absorptions. I don't like the word absorptions. I prefer like meditative disappearances, simplifications, deeper and deeper states of stillness, more things vanishing. I don't know how many of you read one of those books with my name on it, The Art of Disappearing. And that's probably, if somebody ever asked me, what's the best book you've ever written? And I'll put my hand up for that one. Because it's actually calling it as it really should be called. Not attainments, but you're losing things. Things are vanishing. Like suffering. And more suffering vanishes, what can you expect is left? More bliss. And that's actually the positive part of it. So it draws you deeper and deeper into the deeper blisses. And you say about the immaterial attainments, or whatever you call it, the arupas. Those immaterial states, they're less and less. More and more things vanish. And the more that vanishes, the more you bliss out. Really deep blissing. So things are vanishing. It's hard to get similes, but one of the similes I made up was like a person in a hot air balloon. Imagine you're in a hot air balloon and you really go a long way up into the sky. You ascend so far. But then you stop because you can't go any higher. So you think, what else is in the balloon to throw out? Because the more stuff you have in the balloon, in the basket, the less high you can go. So you throw everything out you possibly can think of. And then you get so high and you can't get further. So then you think, what else can I throw out? The basket. And in this simile, the basket represents your body. When you get to our sort of age, you are a basket case. My body is pretty hopeless. So, you untie the basket and the basket floats away, or not floats but falls to the ground, and you, holding on to the ropes of the balloon, go even higher. And it goes so high, but there's still another stage to go yet. So what can you throw out now? And you get the great insight, me. So you throw yourself out. That's your mind, which you don't own anyway. You let it vanish. And then the balloon goes all the way to Nibbana. It's not the best simile, but you try and come up with a better one. I haven't been able to yet. The more you let go, the less you're tied down. Actually, you're not tied down because the thing being tied down disappears as well. Anyway, now this question. Jhanas are meditative not meditative absorption, states of disappearance, and also realms of existence. When a meditation experiences one of the jhanas, does he or she actually go to the corresponding realm for the amount of time the absorption lasts, or is the mind in an independent state of its own? States, they're not like places which pre-exist, like a house which is empty, which can ask the real estate agent, can I move in if you give me enough money? It's already there and you can move into it. These states of existence, most of them, the BSWA, you create these. That's one of the reasons I love having arguments with people. They say, well, you got they sometimes describe one of these heaven realms, for example, the realm of the 32, the 33, the Tawatingsadeva realm. And that was described by the Buddha 2,500 years ago. You mean it hasn't changed since then? They still have these 33 people in the Tawatingsa realm? What if one of them gets a deep insight and becomes fully enlightened? It's only the realm of the 32, or the realm of the 31, or somebody else moves in and becomes the realm of the 40 or the 45. Is it always that static? And if any of you look at the description of those realms, it's very misogynistic. Because they have these big palaces. And this is the heaven realm, okay? And every palace has, I don't know how many 1,000 turrets to it, or 1,000 towers. And every tower is like 1,000 rooms. And in every room there's 1,000 beautiful women. So it's not a heaven realm for the women. Maybe the head man who's in that place may think it's a heaven realm, but I don't know. If you have more than one partner you have to look after in your life, that's a lot of suffering for you. One husband's enough. I don't know what I'm talking about. But nevertheless, the whole idea of it was just some man's fantasy. And they haven't really know what they're talking about. So, a lot of the description of these heaven realms, especially these lower heaven realms, are just a little bit sus. But when you go to these jhana realms, these are realms of existence of the mind. They're not physical. They're mind. And so the same experience you have when you get into one of these deep meditations, your object is just some of the bliss states. And it stays for long periods of time. And if you die in one of those states, it stays even longer. Past the end of the universe. I love saying those things, a theoretical physicist. And again, my friend Bernard Carr, one of the associates of Professor Stephen Hawkins, when he came and visited not so long ago, he saw one of these descriptions of the stages of existence, and it was very fascinating. So this really kind of makes sense. And this was like a black hole expert and Big Bang expert. So this is actually just how we see beings. They're not fully enlightened. What do they do at the end of the universe? Universes do have endings. What is usually the big crunch, it comes back together again, or the big whimper, it runs out of energy. But it has an ending for sure. So what happens to human beings when it ends? They're not all enlightened, so where are you going to go? And there's nowhere to go to. And I said these mind states, the immaterial states, or the Jhana realms. The Jhana realms, you can't meet each other there. I'll see you in first Jhana after you die. The jhanas are just too subtle, they're mind-made, so they last such a long time, and they're individual. So this is what happens. Beings, for the most part, the Buddha said, at the end of the universe, get reborn in the second jhana realm, until another universe develops, which it has to. And then some beings get reborn from the second jhana realm into another 5 sense realm. It's a big picture. As a theoretical physicist, I kind of like that sort of stuff. And so did Bernard. Anyway, I don't know if I answered that, but maybe I made you more confused. Don't worry, just get into a jhana and find out for yourself. Dear Ajahn, you mentioned there is nothing actually here. What was that? Except energy. The zero sum. Rise and fall can come out of nothing. And that's what this universe is. Is arising and ceasing like plus and negative energies? The reason this process continues is due to delusion and upadana. At parinibbana, how does the energies cancel out? Can you kindly explain the process of extinguishment through this plus and minus? Okay. It actually fits with the last question, because when I was asking this, I realized that there was something else to add. And that is, there is such a thing, I'm not talking about physical, a science phenomena, as negative energy. We're not talking about setting people off or always being fault-finding. I'm talking about this thing over here. It's pretty heavy. If I'm going to take this or move it out of the Earth's gravitational field, you have to lose a lot of energy from this piece of metal. So it has a negative energy component in anything as simple as a gravitational field, let alone an electromagnetic field or a field of, say, nuclear energy. So there is something called negative energy. And I remember making this proposal or suggestion to the person who was the head of physics at UWA many years ago, David Blair. And we did a lot of stuff together. He knew that I was trained as a theoretical physicist. And so we did these interesting presentations for people to listen to. And one of those times, like Buddhism and science, I said, we have such a thing as negative energy. And that was an example. Imagine that all the matter and energy of the whole universe all came together. The whole lot drew together and was drawn together and came just into almost like one point. What would happen? And I said, what would happen if everything totally cancelled out? The mass and the energy, what they call mass energy, all was a sum total of zero. And I remember him looking at me. I'm only saying this because I got it right this time. And he said, Ajahn Brahm, you're so up to date. Omega equals 1. And omega was the ratio of the energy in this universe to the matter of this universe. Is that right? No, the positive energy to the negative energy. So that's This universe can come from zero, can come from nothing. And it can expand and then eventually come back. It doesn't expand with a big bang. It comes back together and goes poof, and vanishes forever. Just like you. I found that really cool. I don't know if you understand it, but anyway. How's the time going? Goodness. Is there any mention in the sutras which method of meditation the Bodhisattva used to reach high states of samadhi under the Bodhi tree and become the Buddha? Yes. This is even Gopika Moggallana asked Ananda, after the Buddha had passed away, he asked, what type of meditation did the Buddha recommend? And the Buddha recommended, was it vipassana? Was it samatha? If we had a vote here, which one would you vote for? Vipassana or samatha? Who votes for vipassana? Who votes for samatha? Great, you're learning. Don't answer any of my questions. The Buddha said in particular that the only way, what he did, was not samatha, not vipassana, jhana. The 4 jhanas. That was the only, he said he only recommends 4 types of meditation. First jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. And that's what the Buddha did under the rose apple tree, just the first jhana there, as a bodhisattva. And that's what he did under the Bodhi tree, the 4 jhanas. And check it out for yourself, but that's actually what the Buddha said. And my goodness, and you really get me into talking about jhanas now, but this is core Buddhist practice. You know, we try and have these monasteries, these teachings, these retreat centers, so you can have the opportunity to get into these deep meditations. And if they do, you know exactly what you're talking about. Not only is it powerful, but as the Buddha said, this is where your 5 hindrances can stop for a while. And it's the 5 hindrances, the reason they call them hindrances is because that's what stops you getting wisdom. You can't see clearly. You think you do, but you bend the truth. You don't see yourself doing that. And it's also restlessness and sloth and torpor. How can you actually see things clearly when the mind is so dull? And you only see what you want to see, or you blot out what you don't like to see. In this beginning of this talk, I was talking about doubt. And that was the hardest of the hindrances for me to understand. What actually is doubt? And is it the case that I was just being arrogant? That just I thought, yeah, no, this was an early life memory. It didn't have that feeling of like with arrogance or just being proud. It was just, this was obvious, this was clear, this actually happened. So the doubt thing was totally abolished. I don't know if any of you have noticed, why is it that the shutters on these windows are on that wall, this wall, and the wall over there, but not on the back wall? You know, when I designed this room, yeah, my fault, I was arguing with the architect, please, 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 what do we need windows for? And this is like a meditation hall. You go to my cave. I don't have windows in my cave. I love it like that because you're in the darkness. The light is not affecting you. Because what happens when people start to get things like nimittas, I don't know how many people have come up to me and they said, well, I thought I saw a nimita, a beautiful light in my mind, but it must be just in the window. The sun's shining through the window. And a lot of times, the sun can shine through that window, through that window, through that window, but it never shines through that window. That's why those 3 windows were blocked off. And I can only do that after it was built. Because he said there's like rules and regulations, how much light you need in here, natural light. So if anybody comes and asks me, said, there's not enough light in this window, in this room, I just open up the shutters just for a couple of hours and then shut them up again. Because too many people actually feel these nimittas, they can't be real. People just always doubt themselves. They think somebody's come up with a flashlight. Is there any flashlights in here? Have you got a flashlight in here? There you go. No, I don't want one, thank you. So it's nice when no one shines a flashlight in a person's face. And there's no light coming from the moon or from the sun. We don't have aircraft in this area. So, if you see a light, shining in your face, there's only one thing which it can be. If you're on your back, maybe you can see those lights. But the only thing it can be, it has to be a nimitta. Well done. I want to encourage you and to give yourself some confidence that you can do it. Too many people have too many doubts. You don't need those doubts. You get those confidence, and then after a while, the energy of these nimittas builds up, and you have no doubts at all. These are real. Anyway, I better carry on with these questions. Dear Ajahn Brahm, do stream winners remember that they are sotapanna after they get reborn? If not, then how they only can be reborn max 7 lifetimes? First of all, did you see the error in that? How many times can a stream winner be reborn? Okay, remember you shouldn't answer my questions, always trick questions, but you got it right, 6, correct. Because I always count this life. When you become a stream winner, when you have that experience as number 1, that's 6 more times. And also, this is one of the things which you learned and confirmed by the Vinaya. These are the rules for monks. If any monk or nun, they claim to be a stream winner, the senior monks or nuns are supposed to check you out. Because if it's a claim which has been made and it's a false claim, it's a false claim, you're just boasting, then it means you have to disrobe. It's one of those serious offences, the parajika offences. So a lot of time when somebody has an experience like that as a monastic, you ask them questions to see if it was real or not. That's the duty of the monastics. And because I studied the Vinaya, that's not something which anybody taught me as in Thailand. It's what was actually in the Vinaya Pitaka. And some of the questions they ask you, and this is one of the reasons why I'm repeating it to you now, they ask you, where did you have that experience? When did you have that experience? And they also ask you, what was that experience? And it actually was the most compelling evidence. The stream winning, I'm not just entering the path, but getting the fruit of stream winning, is an experience. You'll be able to tell, inquisitive monks like me, exactly where it was and when it was. Other things like entering the stream, entering the path of stream winning, that can be an experience, and that can be something which just grows on you. And the same with once returning, non-returning is an experience, and obviously full enlightenment is an experience. So this is actually, as a monk, you have to be open to being tested. Are you really a stream winner? So I'll ask you, where did it happen? Why? When? Anyway, do they know, remember they are stream winner after they get reborn? Eventually they will, but as you're reborn, no. You're a baby. Or maybe just as you're reborn, maybe at that time your mind is so strong you'll probably know you're a stream winner just in the first weeks of life. But then just that mind gets kind of dulled out. That's just like the example that many people say that they have memories of their last life quite clear in the first weeks of life, and even up to about 7 years of age. And then it gets all dulled out, and they become, just the person they are, the father and mother, that this is my father and mother. They don't say someone else is their father or mother. But then eventually, if you were a stream winner before, or once returner, then eventually they have to have that experience of seeing non-self. And that's actually where you experience being a stream winner again. It comes back again. It has to. And so when it comes back again, and then you realize what's going on, and you just only got a few lifetimes left. But you never know for sure. It can be much less. Why is it so hard for people to accept themselves? Is this a modern ailment? There might be a lot of truth in that, a modern ailment. One of the reasons is because we're always criticized and put down. People think, your parents almost think that if I don't actually train my kid, and don't tell him off when he makes a mistake, and don't tell her off, then she won't strive for perfection. And that causes so much harm, I reckon. So, to accept themselves, you're good enough. That's one of the reasons why, these are stories you all heard before many times, about like the trees in the forest. Go and look for the most beautiful tree in this forest. The perfect tree. And what is a perfect tree? One which is dead straight, not twisted, not bending over, with all of the branches in the right places, nicely balanced, with all the leaves nicely green, none which are brown or eaten by bugs. And on the bark of the tree, there's no signs of a bushfire 30 years ago. That's why many of the trees here look black on the outside. Beautiful, perfect trees. They don't exist. You try and find one. Every tree in this forest is damaged. And that's why they're beautiful. Damage and being beautiful go together. And because I say that, any of you who've been traumatized by your past, no matter what happened, if you're damaged, you count yourself as being damaged goods. Welcome. Welcome to this beautiful forest of damaged humanity. That really sort of kind of challenges, but frees so many people. They don't have to be perfect. But actually getting into jhanas and getting enlightened, do you have to be perfect to get nimittas? It helps. The more sila, the more virtue you have. But as I told many people years ago, the first time I told this was for the BGF over in Kuala Lumpur. Actually, they were in PJ at the time. And because this guy came up to me, he was actually my attendant. I was talking about nimittas, these beautiful lights in the mind, and they said, sometimes you see these lights in the mind and you can sustain that attention on these beautiful lights in the mind, but sometimes they may look like a dirty rag. And if it does, that means it's showing your precepts a little bit defiled. And it's really true, you can't sort of deny it. You can't sort of say, oh no, my precepts were okay, I was forced to do that, I did it for an ulterior good motive. You actually see it, and it looks like a rag which has been dragged through the mud and needs to go in the washing machine. But I told him, this is the loopholes, the way you can get past that. Because when you see like a dirty rag, it's all the dirt, the stains, they're not evenly spread over the rag. There are some parts of the rag which are cleaner than the others. So what you do, I don't know if I should tell you this, but it works. What you do, you focus on the most beautiful parts of that dirty stained rag, and there where there's less stains. And as you focus in, it's like you zoom in on it, and the beautiful part gets bigger. It's still got a few stains in it, but then you go to the most beautiful part of the most beautiful part, and you see this really much cleaner part of the rag, and you zoom in on that, and you zoom in on that, until all you're zooming in on is really beautiful rag, not rag, but like a piece of cloth. You zoomed out from all the dirty stuff and just got the beautiful stuff, and that becomes this amazing nimita. And then from there it becomes so beautiful, you can stay with it really easily, and it brings a lot of joy and it becomes brighter and brighter, and eventually can lead into a jhana. You have that positive mind state. Some people find it difficult to have positive mind states. They're always looking at the faults. Have a look at the bricks on these walls. Are they perfect? You have a look, there's a few of them could have been laid a bit more carefully. Have a look at the wooden floor. Have you seen any faults in that floor? Have a look in the corner over there. It doesn't actually match, it's like a square there, a rectangle, but in that far corner over there, the fancy floorboards don't actually meet properly. Have you noticed that? Chamari, just over there, can you see that they don't meet properly? They've got a fault in it there. You can? Okay, I can show you afterwards. So a lot of times, if you've got a very positive mind, you can't see the faults. But very few people are that positive, which means they have difficulty with dirty nimittas. And so their lack of perfect sila does hinder them. But there's a way around that. And so even those with imperfect sila can get some incredible deep meditations. Okay, here's another story. Once, not on this retreat, not this time of the year, we had, I think, retreats in, February a long time ago, in a really hot weather. And I was just at the reception area over there, quite early, just hanging around making sure everything was working well. And this guy came into the reception area, and he was wearing traditional Australian uniform or dress. Thongs, shorts, and a dirty t-shirt, and really curly hair. And tattoos on most of his body. I didn't know him at all, looked really rough. And so straight away, I make mistakes too. I love telling you my mistakes. My mistake was I judged him. I'd never seen him before, and he didn't look the sort of person who was coming on a 9-day retreat. So I told him, I said, look, I think you've got the wrong place. The prison farm is up the road over there if you want to meet one of your friends. It's just 6 kilometers up the road, the local prison. And so he said, no, I'm on the retreat. And I checked his name, and he was, who's there? And I had to apologize to him. I'm sorry I judged you way too quickly. Really too quickly. Because on that retreat, he came on one of these interviews we have in the morning or afternoon. And he described his meditation. And it was a real jhana. Blew my mind. he said what had happened, and it was real. I'm pretty tough to convince. And then, sadhu, 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 well done. And the person I least expected, he got these incredible jhanas. He moved over to the east. Well, we found him somewhere over in the east. And he said that experience changed his whole life. So if you don't get a jhana on this retreat, it's probably because you need some more tattoos. And you're too well dressed. I'm only joking, don't quote me on that. But I really appreciated that. Sometimes you can't really tell, but he had something in him which got him through any difficulty and got into a wonderful jhana. The Buddha said there is no soul, correct? I always had this illusion that after death the soul departs from the body and takes rebirth. Then how does rebirth occur? This is not a soul but a stream of consciousness. That's how we explain it. So to explain it with the similes, so many similes, this is my simile. Suppose that you eat a mango. Actually not mango season now, is it? What fruit do we have? Mango season, say. Suppose you eat a mango. And it's really nice and sweet. And so afterwards the seed, you don't want to waste the seed, so you plant it in the garden. And that seed, it's a very healthy seed, it's a good garden, there's enough water, and just, you can actually almost do like a time-lapse photograph of it. That seed kind of splits, and a tiny shoot of green comes out from that crevice in that mango seed, and it pushes its way up through the soil, and eventually gets just above the soil, and then it gets thicker and stronger, and at first you may feel it's just a blade of grass. It's not a blade of grass. It becomes like a sapling. It's a mango sapling. It keeps on growing and growing and growing. That which was the seed, I don't know exactly what happens to it, but it kind of disappears, becomes just the roots of that new mango sapling. And then the sapling gets thicker and throws out branches, and then it soon becomes a little sapling plant, and it grows and grows over quite a few years. And then you can see at the right time of the year it forms little flowers on the end of many of the twigs, and those flowers get fertilized, and at the base of those flowers it starts to swell and get thicker and thicker, and it becomes a little like bud there, and that bud grows and grows and it becomes the mango fruit. And then eventually it goes first of all green and then yellow, if I remember correctly, and then red, and you've got a new mango that's grown. Is it the same as the first mango which you ate? It will be different. Even some of the DNA would have changed slightly. But you can see the connection in time from one moment to the next, how that new mango developed from the first mango. Not the same, not different. It's like you, from one life to the next life. Not the same, but not different. That's how the Buddha taught it. Not the same, but not different. It's not just a direct rebirth, some essence inside you before you die, and that essence gets protected, and that essence forms the core of a new life. Everything is different, subject to change and growth. As a theoretical physicist, I always remember just going to the Cavendish laboratory in Cambridge University, and the two rooms which I remember, one was the room where the Kiwi scientist, Rutherford, first split the atom. And I knew that before, but actually seeing the room where that actually happened, that was really far out. And that changed so much about our understanding of life. And especially as a monk, then I realized that there's a similarity there with the person who split the Atma. Who am I talking about? The Buddha, yeah. That's what we idea of the essential particle which makes up beings, the soul. They call it the Atma. And I wanted to find out, is there any connection between those two words? Because sometimes in language we call it the Indo-Aryan language. English is one of those. So is Pali or Sanskrit. And the word atom in Greek, that's where we get the word atom from, is called like indivisible. That's what it means. You can't split it up. And that's how I understand Atma too. So Rutherford was not the first person who split the atom. That was the Buddha. The Atma. Split it up, find out it's not the indivisible essence of beings. I like that similarity there between those two words. I thought that was really cool. Probably incorrect, but it's still cool. Okay. So anyway, just what happens is when you... How can you prove that? What happens after you die? Okay, here we go again with jhanas. What happens with a jhana, if you really get into these jhanas, first of all, before you get into the full jhana, what happens? You see the nimita, the beautiful light. Do you think any of you are going to fail to see that light? I guarantee each one of you will see that beautiful light which I refer to as a nimita. If not while you're meditating, you'll see it once you die. Haven't you heard about floating up towards the light? What is that light? What's the similarities between death and going into these nimittas or jhanas? The similarity is that your five senses turn off when you die. That's what's called death. And so what do you see once you die? These beautiful lights. So if it's just deep meditation, yeah, you see the beautiful light and then you come back into full conscious awareness afterwards. If it's death, you see the light and then you're gone. That's why this meditation method, we also call it Death 101 training. I don't mention that in the blurb about we're having sort of a nice retreat, and if I said this is learning what death is like, no one might come. Actually, it might be an idea, because we always get too many people come on these retreats. So anyhow, but that's actually the simile there. And so usually if you get into a jhana, and I'm being quite serious now, you understand just what death is like. And you'll never be afraid of death. Afraid of dying, yes, but not death. Dying is sometimes painful. But once that moment of death happens, the body vanishes and the five senses turn off. Bliss. Anyway, are you still happy? It's 20 to 9. Can I carry on, or are you fed up? Are you afraid? Okay, I'll do some more. Dear Ajahn Brahm, no matter how many coffees or tea I have during the day, I am happily sleeping in my meditation. Specifically after the stage of the beautiful breath, and after I felt no more breath left, and it's disappearing, then everything is calm, no senses at all, just sleeping. Could you please advise me how to address this issue? Thank you so much. One of the ways of addressing that issue is, before you feel you're gone to sleep, when the breath is there and it's starting to disappear, a lot of time, this is a simile which I've used to very good effect, it's like you're in a very lit room like here, and you go outside the door, one of these doors, there's no sort of ante-room, you go straight out into the darkness. You can't see anything, because the pupils of your eyes are kind of smaller in a lit room, because you don't need to let so much light in. When you walk outside, sort of, before you can see clearly, you have to give time for the pupils of your eyes to dilate, to let more light in. And sometimes that's what happens when you get into deep states of awareness, which are far more subtle. It takes time for you to know, your mind to know how to receive more information. So it's not like nothing is happening, it's far more subtle. And after a while, you can actually pick up things. So the first thing I would advise, if that is happening to you, then no need to take more cups of tea or coffee. That's actually part of the problem. You don't need to sort of add to that type of energy. You just need to learn how to be more discerning. Stay there. And after a while, you'll be able to see more. And the other problem there is the other thing which is missing, that's why a person can fall asleep or just basically turn off, is because what you experience is not joyful and interesting enough. So many times this has happened to me. I remember one time, when I was still a student, I was traveling in Central America and was just going along, and I'd have to go without sleep for a day to be able to catch the buses and also a fishing boat. And the fishing boat was going to take me up this border between British Honduras and Guatemala. It was the only way to get to these ancient Mayan ruins in Tikal. And it was obviously adventurous, but I'd gone without sleep for such a long time. But then I remember just really feeling really sleepy. But then the boat was actually traveling along the Caribbean coast as the sun came up. And the sunrise was so gorgeous. And there's, there's a fight between sleepiness and seeing this gorgeous sunrise. And seeing the gorgeous sunrise won. I just couldn't go to sleep. It was one of the most beautiful sunrises I've ever seen in my life. So because it was really interesting, enjoyable, just I couldn't turn off into sleep. I'll catch up on that later. And I always remember that. What overcome the sleepiness, the dullness, for me in that time was seeing the beauty, the interest. And the same thing happens with meditation. Sometimes the meditation gets so gorgeous and you haven't slept. You can't. The inspiration, the joy, the happiness overcomes the tiredness, overcomes the dullness, which is one of the reasons why I ask each one of you. So, if you get a bit dull, just start to recollect all the good karma you've done in your life, all the beautiful sacrifices you've done in your life, all the things which really make you inspired. And if you can remember those, wow. Bhikkhunis, Samaneris, what have you been doing? And what you've been doing is literally historic. I love saying that word. People are going to write books about you. The people who restarted Theravada Buddhism, good Buddhism, for women in the future. That's you. You're heroes to half the population. When you really get into that, wow. First of all, you don't believe me, do you? You think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. When you start to feel like that, wow, you go back to your rooms and you can't sleep. You know how real this is. And then you have all this incredible bliss coming up, and the meditation is so easy. When you have the joy and the bliss, you don't need coffee. The bliss is much more powerful. Do you agree with me? They're heroes. I didn't hear you properly. Yes. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yeah, it's true. That's why sometimes, remember the first time we did the ordination for bhikkhunis. And I'd just come back, when I did that bhikkhuni ordination, I just flew back directly from London. And not directly, I was passing over, changing planes in Singapore or something. It was a long flight. And then, should we do this, should we not? Oh yes, go for it. And so we did that bhikkhuni ordination. I just come back from a long flight. Should have been jet lagged and exhausted. That didn't matter. You did it. It worked. If I ever get tired, I just think of that and you get teary-eyed. Great thing to be able to do. Okay, so that's actually how not to need so much coffee and tea. Inspiration. How to establish mindfulness while sitting. Each time I close my eyes, I relax the whole body first, then I think I fall into a daze-like state, unable to have mindfulness to watch the breath. Please help. So you close your eyes, you're sitting there, and you get a bit dull. Don't fight the dullness. That was one big mistake. Because a lot of times when I was practicing first over in northeast Thailand, the food was disgusting and it wasn't rich at all. Because all the sandy soil there, when the rains came, lots of rains come, and it washed out all the nutrients in the soil. You know, one of the things I don't tell many people I did over there was I built a methane generator, which was fueled by buffalo poo. The water buffalo, we collected the water buffalo and put it in this big tub, and it generated methane. But it didn't generate as much methane as it should have done, because even the water buffalo in that part of Thailand were malnourished. That's what I found out. Nothing wrong with the machine, just the fuel was just very poor. And that's one of the reasons that's the food which I ate, from the local food. There's not much to eat, so believe it or not, I was extremely thin in those days. To show you how, you got a few photos of me, but the story I like telling about how thin I was, that one of the monks in that part of Thailand who was very well known, and he was actually the meditation teacher for the king of Thailand at that time. And I went to stay with him for a short while, and when I went to his monastery to stay, the other monks told me that there's only one meal of the day in this monastery, and then once you can't start eating until Ajahn Brahm starts. He has to start first. And please make sure you eat fast, because once Ajahn Brahm finishes eating, everybody has to finish eating. So sometimes you don't have much time. And that was really strict. If you ate after he stopped, I think you're thrown out of the monastery or something. So I was warned. I had my spoon at the ready, like everybody else. One meal of the day, you can't mess up. And then he started eating, and all the other monks was eating as fast as they can, me too. And then when he finished eating, we had to put our spoons down. And this is honest. He looked at me, of all those monks, there's quite a few Western monks with him. He looked at me and he said, "You, carry on eating." He actually ordered me to carry on eating. I usually am rebellious, but that order I accepted with humility. Honestly, I was really, really thin. But that's, just to let you know that that's how I used to be. And there's pictures to prove it. Anyway, I should carry on for... What was that one about anyway? Oh, Alex in the whole body. There are times I woke up feeling anxious, heart beating fast, and having short breath. At times I felt the above after bad dreams. What can I do when I'm in this situation? First of all, don't have bad dreams. Can you stop having bad dreams? One of the things is just have this beautiful, positive mind state. So if that doesn't work, put a piece of paper and pen next to your bed. And if you have a bad dream, write it down. I know a few people, actually it's more difficult these days, but in the old days, a few people in Hollywood, and we could give that as a script, for like DreamWorks or somewhere. Send it off to Mr. Spielberg. It's a new script for a horror movie. You dreamt it. You can, but of course we have to split the proceeds 50-50. 50 for you and 50 for John. I'm sure that Richard Gere, he's a Buddhist, so I'm sure he'd be interested to help out a nice monastery if you've got a nice script. So any bad dreams, please write them down. They're getting very hard up for good scripts these days. So they'll probably be really interested in your horror dream, your bad dream. So don't waste it. You can make a lot of money out of these things. That's my old simile. If you tread in a dog poo, there's a lot of money to be made out of that dog poo if you go and make fertilizer out of it. Okay. I think I'll answer that question. It's getting late now, so that's when I make silly answers to good questions. I have lots of responsibilities I'm taking care of, both my parents and their and 3 kids. I hope to find a solution to reduce the above condition. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. You've got 3 kids. They're not going to stay as kids. So, eventually, just look after them, love them to bits, and they will eventually look after you. Is that true? If they're a Buddhist, that sometimes if you're kind to them, they respect you. I still remember my father, especially my father, opening the door of your heart. And because I loved him so much, there came a time, I was born in 1951, in the 60s and 70s, many of my peers at school started getting into drugs. There's one of those peers who's absolutely crazy. He also went to Cambridge studying medicine, and he got into heroin. And because of that, he needed that heroin, and his support was just so hard to get that, I was a monk at this time, but he was going to visit some of my other friends, and they eventually had to lock the door because he would steal whatever he could find. He needed that to sell, to feed his habit. And I still remember one of my close friends, and when I remember I was only just doing A-levels at the time, and on the bus, the 266, I still remember the number, going home from school, he was talking to me how he had taken some marijuana and got busted, and he said his life at home was a hell. And at that time my father was on the edge of life and death. And I remember just going home thinking, if I followed the peer pressure and took sort of marijuana and was caught, they would kill my dad. And because of that, I thought, I just can't do that, because I love my father. I don't know if you appreciate that, the love was so strong. I didn't matter how I didn't fit in with my friends. I was not going to take that out of concern for my dad. And then later when I got to university, that's when I started being a Buddhist. And the teachers of meditation made it very clear to me that's going to really hinder your progress in meditation. And that's actually how I avoided marijuana as a kid. I still remember just walking. I went to, just before going to university, I went over to the United States. I got bored there and went to Central America. But then I remember walking down Haight-Ashbury. That was a bit late for the Summer of Love. But nevertheless, that was kind of still a lot of sort of alternative people there. And this group of Afro-Americans asked me if I had any, not drug, what they called it in those days, ganja? Weed or something. And I said no, I was just being honest. And they got really upset. They said, well, are you a policeman or something? And I got out my passport and said, no, I'm English, just coming for a visit. And they actually were interested. Well, why aren't you taking any weed? Do you want any? And I said, no, just because I didn't take it because of my love for my father. I was honest. And they just let me walk past. But they were about to beat me up. It was quite dangerous, because I was not doing what other people were doing. I always remember that. And I felt really good about that later on in life. I avoided the marijuana just because I loved my dad. And if he was healthy, I probably would have taken it. Anyway, the account of some monks of committing suicide is in Vaisali Sutta, Samyutta Nikaya 5410, in Anapana Samyuttika. But it's also in the main quote is in the Vinaya Pitaka, and that's the Parajika from Parajika 3, right? Or 2, about the one about killing, as you'd expect it to be. And the account in the Parajika, that's the one which I was kind of quoting. It's in more detail there. And Migalindika was the name of this guy he thought he was doing a meritorious job. He was conned into sort of killing all these monks. And he would go from hut to hut. Anyone else want to be helped? And that's when a few monks, okay, never mind. And a lot of monks hid. But that's where the Buddha said afterwards, how come the Sangha of monks is so declined? And that's why I started talking about Anapanasati. Oh yeah, Ajahn, I have a feeling that you're relating the account from the Vinaya. Yes. That's why a lot of people haven't heard that account before. But it's in there, and that's kind of interesting, I thought anyway. Give you something you haven't heard before. Okay, 59. I've got 5 seconds to do the last question. How come I feel so peaceful around you? You're like a heater radiating peace and compassion. Is there a way to explain this with physics? Very easy answer, no. But thank you for listening. But it is true, because I remember some of these monks, Ajahn Chah not so much, I got used to him. But there's one of these monks, please excuse me for going over time, but I love this story because it meant so much to me. And that was Ajahn Tate. And I first knew about him when I first went to Thailand. He was in the biggest hospital in Bangkok, Sirirat Hospital. All expenses being paid by His Majesty the King of Thailand. He was dying of cancer. And then when the doctor said, there's nothing more we can do for you, you're going to die pretty soon, he said, well, I don't want to die in Bangkok. I'm going back to my monastery. It's on the Mekong River. I'll die up there. So off he went. I think he died about 25 years later. So monks are very stubborn, they refuse to die. So anyway, this particular monk, I realized he was a great monk, so I wanted to go and see him, just to be in his presence, but also to ask some questions. I couldn't ask Ajahn Chah. So I went up there, made an appointment to see him. I had to wait for a couple of days. He was really popular. And when I went to see him, had my appointment, it was such a long way to go and had to wait for so long. And I realized he wouldn't live for that much longer. And then in his presence, I had all his questions prepared. But as soon as I went into the room, this is why I really remember this so clearly. I went into the room, and this was this tiny old monk sitting on a chair looking out over the Mekong River. And the idea of a great monk, he was just so small and insignificant it looked. But when he turned to meet my gaze, it just, every question I had just fell away. And that was amazing. I felt so embarrassed, like the questions had all disappeared. He was such a kind monk, as if I never felt any threat at all. I didn't need to know anything more. And then I just looked at him and thought, I better say something. And so I said that it's better we answer our own questions than ask anyone else. Is that true? He said, yeah. And then you kind of like bathe in a person's peace and kindness. And the next thing which I noticed, and won't never forget, I had this thought, to get me out of this place, that I have to get, all the headmen of the villages close by and the strongest of the water buffalo and tie chains to me to pull me out of here. He didn't want to go anywhere else in the whole world. He just felt so at ease and so bathed in this very great monk's kindness. And many years later, I remember, I still respect him so much. Many years, can I tell this story? Yeah, okay. Many years later, when we did these weekend retreats in Safety Bay, do you remember those, Prem? I remember just at that time I was really the builder, so I never had any rest. The builder in Bodhinyana Monastery, and didn't get much rest. And Friday evening I was going to start this weekend retreat there. And you're really exhausted and tired, and I thought, what am I going to teach tonight? I haven't got a clue what I'm going to teach. And then the idea was, should I teach loving kindness or should I teach breath meditation? And I got this brilliant idea, let's teach both together. Loving kindness with breathing. And that was just brilliant. Sometimes you have to be exhausted to allow the mind to go past all those barriers and see something new. And that was just such a wonderful I don't just teach you guys, I listen to what I say and I practice it. And so that was just such a powerful meditation, a powerful talk. It was so powerful that night, I was exhausted, I did fall asleep, but I remember having this dream, really good dreams. And the dream was I was walking in a Thai cemetery with all these famous monks, please excuse me, I didn't know many nuns in those days. All these famous monks, they just had these little sticks with their names on. And then I got to Ajahn Tate's sort of funeral or burial sort of little piece of wood. And that turned into the most gorgeous nimita. And it's such a powerful nimita. That was the end of sleep that night. Just blissing yourself out. Because still, even though I was exhausted, still had that beautiful energy, from doing loving kindness together with breath meditation all together. And just seeing this beautiful monk, just having the dream of him, and just turned into like a nimita. Oh, that was a great night. You didn't worry you didn't have any sleep, because you were just blissing yourself out. I don't know, am I saying too much? It's a bit late, and I've got to be careful not to say too much because it's against the rules. And I hate those rules. But I can see the purpose of them, that they stop other people making up things. I don't make up things. Okay, so sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. There's still a few more left. Actually, there's quite a few left. Goodness gracious me. So what the rule usually is, because there's quite a few questions left, if your question has not been answered tonight, and you want to ask a question for tomorrow, you have to find your question in here and replace it with a new question if you want to ask another question. But if you have a question in here which has not been answered, please do not ask another one tomorrow. Is that fair enough? Okay. And hopefully I'm a bit more efficient tomorrow. There's actually quite a few questions I've answered. You know my fault, I just get blissed out and just really interested in some of these questions. They're really great. Thank you. Oh, yeah, I'm going to take this off.